Today we're plunging into Peter Zeihan's, well, rather stark yet compelling vision for the future, drawing from his 2022 book, The End of the World is Just the Beginning.
Yeah, this isn't your typical geopolitical forecast, that's for sure. Zeihan offers a surprising and often pretty unsettling perspective on the future of global order, trade, and even just the fabric of daily life.
Right.
So our mission today is really to unpack his core arguments, distill the key insights, and help you understand why he puts it like this. The end of the world is just the beginning.
His analysis certainly forces us to rethink how we see the world. I mean, from global trade right down to the very ground beneath our feet. Let's dive in. Okay, so Zeihan kicks off with a truly bold claim, doesn't he? Since 1945, the world has been the best it has ever been, the best it will ever be.
Mm-hmm.
He posits that the American-led order, the one that's underpinned global security and trade, is basically giving way to widespread disorder. So what's the central mechanism, he argues, is causing this unwinding? And how does he see it playing out globally?
Well, a core idea here, his central premise really, is that globalization itself will just shatter into pieces.
Shatter. Wow.
Yeah, he foresees collapse of consumption, production, investment, and trade pretty much everywhere. And he attributes this mainly to two sort of intertwined factors.
Okay.
First, the withdrawal of American military capacity,
Mm-hmm.
the naval power that secures global shipping lanes. And second, the relentless march of global aging.
Aging, right.
As the global worker and consumer base ages into mass retirement, and crucially, without a replacement generation coming up behind them, thanks to rapid urbanization, the economic systems we know are just, well, they're not sustainable.
And this is where his analysis gets really different, isn't it? He says no economic system we've ever imagined can actually function in the future we face.
Exactly.
He predicts this will make life slower and worse, describing it as a terrifying new world of less, where everything that has underpinned humanity's economic existence just unwinds all at once. It's a pretty jarring thought for a world built on more.
It really is.
Yeah.
A fundamental shift.
So one of Zeihan's foundational concepts is the first rule of geopolitics: location matters. And which locations matter more changes with the technology of the day.
Mm-hmm.
He traces this back to what he provocatively calls the Great Poo Breakthrough, kind of a funny term for the advent of sedentary agriculture, where managing waste suddenly became, a critical factor for permanent settlements.
Right. It sounds funny, but it's fundamental.
Can you walk us through how geography shapes success across different eras, maybe starting with hunter-gatherers?
Absolutely. So Zeihan highlights how humanity's interaction with this environment fundamentally evolved over time. In the hunter-gatherer era, success was all about range and variety.
Okay.
Good nutrition meant accessing multiple types of plants and animals, which required easy relocation as local resources got depleted. So people tended to concentrate in areas with great climatic variety in a sort of dense footprint.
Like mountains.
Exactly. Like mountain foothills, where different climate zones were accessible within a short distance, or maybe where tropics met savanna, offering diverse seasonal resources. You needed options close by.
Gotcha. And then with agriculture, these imperial centers emerged. He talks about places with a magic mix, mild climate, flattish terrain, and river or sea access.
Yes, that's the key combination. He argues this mix enabled them to generate surplus, build defenses, accrue wealth, and eventually conquer neighbors. He points to city-states in northern Italy. With their dense webs of navigable rivers, they became regional powers by generating massive income flows, which let them fortify, expand services, and project power.
And then the arrival of deep water navigation, that changed everything again, right? Shattering the tyrannies of distance, as he puts it.
Totally. A game changer. Until then, trade was incredibly rare, mostly limited to exotic, non-perishable things, spices, porcelain, that kind of
Right.
stuff.
High value, low weight.
Exactly. But with deep water ships, suddenly the simple economics of moving goods from places of high supply to high demand became infinitely more complex. Industrialized places could now ship massive volumes of unique products across vast distances. It transformed everything.
Okay, so as these industrial gears started grinding, what happened when they collided with the established social structures? Zeihan describes this avalanche of social upheaval, revolutions, riots, political collapses, and wars. That sounds intense.
It was. A crucial point he makes is how industrialization, while it brought these massive income flows, simultaneously just ripped apart existing social structures.
How so? Give us some examples.
Well, look at Britain. Their experience led to dumping cheap products globally, which caused economic disruption elsewhere, leading to military conflicts.
Okay.
Then there's Russia. Their industrialization in the early 20th century basically broke both the landlord class and the serf class, leading directly, he argues, to the mass oppressions under the Soviet Union.
Wow.
Germany's super-fast industrialization. It created an industrial oligarchy, shattered its middle class, and generated this series of revolutions and civil wars that really set the stage for the world wars.
Right.
Japan's early industrial efforts led to the end of the samurai class and a kind of radicalization, contributing eventually to things like Pearl Harbor.
And China.
China's process centralized power so intensely that it unleashed, the bleak horrors of the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution. So, yeah, massive disruption everywhere.
It definitely paints a picture of intense competition, both internal and external, all driven by this new industrial might. But America seems to be a bit of an outlier in his narrative.
That's right. He notes the Americans certainly had their own issues, regional disparities, robber barons,
Sure.
But their robber barons found such massive opportunities in the private sector, largely thanks to geography, that economic stress didn't automatically boil over into political stress in the same way it did elsewhere. And then it's intriguing how he frames the American role after World War II, transforming the global security and economic architecture, basically allowing that European industrialization and urbanization experience to go global.
Right, the post-war order.
Exactly. The first wave hit Western Europe, the defeated Axis powers, places like South Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, leading to mass development, urbanization, and those big demographic shifts we talked about earlier.
Which brings us to what Zeihan calls the American More, Part 1, Geography. He lists this incredible array of advantages. What makes the U.S. so uniquely positioned, according to him?
Well, a key takeaway here is just the sheer scale of American geographic advantages. It's kind of staggering.
Yeah.
He states the U.S. has more high-quality temperate zone, arable farmland than any other country, period.
More than anywhere else.
Yeah. Its entire agricultural supply chain is within North America, making it the world's largest agricultural producer and exporter. So food security. For the U.S., it's a complete non-issue.
Okay, that's huge. What else?
Add to that, more land suitable for habitation. Much lower internal transport costs because of its omnipresent internal waterways, he says, more than the rest of the world combined.
More than the entire rest of the world.
Combined, yeah. And then you have the lowest unsubsidized electricity costs, thanks to the shale revolution.
It really does sound like a geographic cheat code for national success.
It kind of is. And he also highlights America's robust financial depth, which stemmed originally from that internal river network. It didn't just support farming. It bootstrapped early regional development in infrastructure, education.
Which cushions some of those stresses you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. It made economic stress less likely to automatically become political stress compared to other places.
So what does this imply for the future, then?
Well, the implication is significant. While the U.S. population is aging, he argues, the U.S., along with Mexico, has decades, at least until the 2050s, to sort of unwind and rewire their systems.
Unlike others.
Unlike others who he thinks have just a few years. He points out there's an advantage to being a late bloomer in demographic terms. Americans and Mexicans can look across the world and learn from what everyone else tried.
I see. Learning from others' mistakes or successes.
Right. It gives them significant wiggle room in handling capital loss. And it pretty much guarantees them the largest slice of capital flight coming out of a more troubled world, especially given, relatively conservative U.S. monetary policy and the dollar still being the sole reserve currency.
Okay, we've laid the historical groundwork and the U.S. advantage. Now, let's fast forward to this imminent unraveling Zeihan warns about, starting with what he calls the agony of the physics of transport and the great unmaking of global supply chains. Modern life depends on these incredibly fragile chains, doesn't it? What are the key vulnerabilities he points to?
Oh, absolutely fragile. He underscores that modern vessels are fat beasts. These transoceanic container ships holding thousands of containers packed with intermediate goods. These are the bits and pieces essential for making nearly everything we manufacture.
Right, not just finished products.
Not at all, mostly components. And critically, modern ports are few, far between, absolutely massive, and typically not collocated with the populations they serve. They're bottlenecks.
So if one ship gets delayed.
Exactly. If any single ship can't transport or unload its cargo, the impacts just cascade throughout hundreds to thousands of supply chains across multiple industries and multiple regions. He uses that great line. It takes 30,000 pieces to make a car. If you only have 29,999 pieces, you've got an ambitiously sized paperweight.
Yeah. Yeah, that really highlights the extreme specialization and interdependence, doesn't it?
It really does. Our entire manufacturing system is built on it.
And the energy picture sounds just as critical, maybe even more so. He flat out states that the modern industrial urban lifestyles of most of the human population require oil. That oil will not be there. What are the implications of that coming energy breakdown?
Yeah, this brings up a really vital point. How are these massive concentrations of people in cities, this urbanization, going to function without ample
Yeah.
energy? It just won't be possible.
Right.
He notes total global oil demand doubled since 1980, mostly because all these new players were industrializing and urbanizing under the American security umbrella.
Okay.
So in this post-American order, he describes transport links shrivel up first. That hits everything from manufacturing supply chains, like we just discussed, to food distribution. And then many electricity systems will fail due to lack of fuel.
Fail completely.
That's what he suggests, leading to a grim choice: to go without electricity, to deindustrialize, to decivilize. Or the alternative is often reverting back to coal, even dirty lignite, which he notes Germany is already doing.
Because green tech isn't ready.
Because green tech, he argues, is woefully unapplicable to the German geography. Wind and solar are intermittent. They're not dispatchable. You can't just turn them on when needed. So they always need full conventional backup, which often means coal or gas. And he points out something like 95% of humanity gets electricity from plants less than 50 miles away because transmission costs are so high over distance. Local energy becomes paramount.
Okay, so if globalization unravels and energy gets scarce and local, how do different regions fare? Zeihan maps out these geographies of success in what he calls a capital-constrained world, where money flows to places with low-hanging fruit, flat, temperate zones, educated populations.
Yeah, the larger context here is basically a stark reassertion of older historical patterns driven by geography. He predicts Northern Europe will fare better than Southern Europe, and places like India, Russia, Brazil, the Middle East, Sub-Saharan Africa face much tougher times.
Why Northern Europe over Southern?
Well, geography again, but also demographics. He notes Europe's demographic challenges overall mean it cannot absorb its own products internally and relies heavily on exports, especially to the U.S., which he sees as turning ever inward.
So that export market shrinks.
Right. And within Europe, Germany is the economic engine, but has, in his view, no options but to be the center weight of everything, kind of stuck. While France and the UK have more capacity to go solo, but they haven't fully integrated their strengths with the rest of Europe. He even suggests Europe's whole social democratic model can't really survive without the support of the global order.
That's a big statement. What about Asia? He mentions Japan, Korea, and Taiwan handle the high-value manufacturing, but China is a different story altogether.
Oh, absolutely. Zeihan really highlights China's demographic collapse. He calls it the fastest aging society in human history, with birth rates among the lowest of any people throughout human history.
The lowest ever. Wow.
That's what he says. Its demographic contraction is now happening as fast as its previous expansion, with complete collapse certain to occur within a single generation. That's a shocking timeline.
So despite all its manufacturing,
Yeah, despite that prowess, he notes China has proven broadly incapable of manufacturing high-value-add components like advanced microchips, the tiny, powerful brains of modern electronics, or jet engines on its own.
really? I thought they made everything.
They assemble a lot, but most of the actual value add for things like household electronics, office equipment, computers, sometimes over 90% happens outside China. And critically, there's the military aspect. China's Navy is mostly coastal or near coastal.
Okay.
Only about 10% of its main warships can really sail more than 1,000 miles from shore, effectively. This makes their supply lines very vulnerable. Japan, by contrast, has a Navy fully capable of sailing and fighting a continent or two away, potentially positioned to cut off Chinese resource inflows if things got hostile.
That flips the usual narrative a bit. And what about food production? He talks about an unwinding of progress there too, moving from large-scale, export-driven monoculture, huge fields of one crop for the world market, to small-scale, local-driven polyculture, growing diverse crops together locally. That sounds like a massive shift.
It's fundamental. He argues the sheer volume of foods produced on Earth in aggregate must decline,
Why must it decline?
because the whole system of global specialization is breaking down. He points out that in the advanced world, wheat was often pushed to marginal lands, while the best land was used for everything else: corn for ethanol, soybeans, specialized crops, all assuming easy global trade. That system ends,
Oh, okay.
and staples face huge pressure. Rice, critical for billions, is incredibly vulnerable to climatic shifts and also to urban sprawl eating up farmland. Plus, there are critical water issues in places like China and India, where he notes a third of the population already lives in semi-arid regions.
So when supply links break and global inputs like fertilizer aren't reliable.
Yeah, you begin to see the sheer scale of the potential food challenge.
Mhm.
It becomes much more local, much less reliable, and likely much less abundant overall.
Wow. Zeihan's analysis provides this deeply personal, almost visceral look at what the end of globalization and the end of global energy could actually mean for our daily lives. I mean, from the price of chicken to just getting parts for our cars,
Hmm.
it suggests such a profound shift in how we live.
Yeah, this deep dive really reminds us that so much of what we've often taken for granted, lights always coming on, diverse food options year-round, it's all built upon this incredibly complex and, as he argues, fragile global architecture. And his emphasis on these almost tiny shifts in cost, like how even a 1% increase in the cost of some subsidiary part can just obliterate the economics of an existing supply chain. He makes it clear just how precarious the current system
He
is,
says most places will be fortunate if their transport costs increase by only 100%.
which is just staggering to think about the downstream effect. This isn't just about the end of globalization in some abstract sense. He's really talking about the potential end of the very kinds of lives we've come to know.